Screen by Marcel Khalife. Here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Our guest today is Dr. Warren Hern, speaking to us from Boulder, Colorado in 1988. His clinic was shot at a number of times. In 2001, he wrote in a newspaper column after Dr. Barnett Slepian was killed upstate New York through his kitchen window. Dr. Hern wrote, "Will I get to live out my life? Who's next?" Dr. Hern, why do you continue under this level of threat?
Well, in the first place, why shouldn't I be able to practice medicine and help people in my own country and help women and their families who need this without this kind of threat? I think I opened my practice in 1975 because I thought providing abortion services and performing abortion, most important thing I could do in medicine. It was also a statement that I believe this is something that women should be able to do, and I believe this as a public health physician. I believe this matters very much for the health of our society. I continue to do it because I think it matters for the health of women, it matters for the health of their families, it matters for the health of our society, and now it matters for freedom. Ronald Reagan tried to make abortion a political crime against the state. And it was staggering. He was brought into office with the active and fervent support of the anti-abortion fanatics, and the Republican Party has exploited that movement for 35 years to get power. And unfortunately, one of the incredibly terrible results of that was visited upon us was the administration of George W. Bush, who was the emissary to the anti-abortion groups for his father when he was president. But this is right now, performing an abortion is a political act in this country, and why should that have to be true? But that's what it is.
We're also joined on the telephone by a genetic counselor. For the past 3 years, she's been a member of the National Society of Genetic Counselors. She's speaking out today because the society, she says, has not put out a public statement condemning Dr. Tiller's murder. She wishes to remain anonymous. We called the National Society of Genetic Counselors to get a public statement, to find out about this public statement, why it hasn't been issued. We asked them wanted to ask them to be on the program, but they didn't respond. We welcome you to Democracy Now! Talk about what your work is and why you feel that the National Society of Genetic Counselors should be putting out this statement.
Well, I mean, genetic counselors can work in a lot of different settings. Nowadays, things have really diversified, but when the field sort of started up in the mid-'70s, the primary work setting was a prenatal setting, and in fact that still is the primary work setting for the vast majority of genetic counselors, meaning that they work in a clinical setting and they work with pregnant women. And they help pregnant women, they help to facilitate decision-making processes sometimes in cases where genetic testing may be warranted, or the option of genetic testing, where sometimes there are ultrasound findings that come up, and women find themselves in situations where couples find themselves in situations where they're facing a decision about their pregnancy. So the National Society of Genetic Counselors and genetic counselors in general were probably making the vast majority of referrals, because of their patients' choices, to Dr. Tiller's clinic. So it seems to me that it would have been appropriate for the National Society of Genetic Counselors to issue a public statement condemning his murder.
And what happened?
They didn't make one. And when I inquired about that, I was initially told that it wouldn't be in their best interest, and I got a pretty vague response. And then I was informed that there were some genetic counselors who specifically requested they not make a public statement.
Why? Why?
Well, I think there was some fear, and I think that's exactly the problem, that Dr. Hern mentioned, that there's this climate of fear now, and it's because of these extremists, these anti-choice people, that everybody's now even more afraid. And not only just the actual providers, but people who are indirectly related to sort of referring people to these clinics aren't even willing to admit their involvement. And I think that's really a shame, because the entire basis of the field of genetic counseling is to help facilitate choice and for people to make decisions that are best for them.
Now, the association didn't have to be for or against abortion to issue a condemnation of Dr. Tiller's murder.
That's right, exactly. And in fact, of course, there are certainly genetic counselors who consider themselves to be pro-life, and that's okay. But I think that, as you said, you don't have to support abortion per se, but certainly it would have been appropriate to condemn his murder at the very least. That was my feeling.
What has the National Society of Genetic Counselors done?
They're starting a memorial fund, and they sent out a letter to all of its members, kind of, condemning his death, but just within our profession. So it really hasn't reached the public, and I think it's just really sad because I think the public already very much lacks understanding of what it means to be pro-choice. People think that if you facilitate choice or you are pro-choice, that means you're pro-abortion. And I think the field, in my opinion, the field of genetic counseling is a pro-choice field to go into. Not everybody agrees with me on that. But in my opinion, whether or not you would make a decision to have an abortion yourself is really irrelevant if you're in a position to support a woman or a couple's choice to make whatever decision they feel is right about their pregnancy.
And why didn't you want to be identified today?
I mean, primarily I didn't want to be identified. I really don't want to alienate people in my profession. It's really a small profession. People really tend to know each other, and I just thought that this was better this way. I've had strong feelings about this issue from the get-go, and I'm not alone in that, but I felt like this was a good opportunity to have my voice be heard without having everybody kind of figure out who it is and, make it become more gossipy than anything else.
Dr. Warren Hern, is this of concern to you, the society not issuing a public statement?
Yes, I think I'm very distressed to hear this. I'm actually a member of the National Society of Genetic Counselors, and I have gone to a number of their meetings and made presentations. I was Dr. Tiller and I both had exhibits at these meetings so that people can be informed, and it's very interesting. Some people are very interested and very supportive, and other people have been very hostile in their attitudes. Dr. Tiller, in fact, sponsored talks and made presentation. I went to one of his talks that he gave to this society in Savannah, Georgia, several years ago, and in about I'm not sure when it was, but in a meeting in Washington D.C., Dr. Kenneth Adelin was invited to speak to this group. Dr. Kenneth Adelin is a courageous, fabulous doctor from Boston who had risked his life and had to help women and was persecuted and prosecuted for this in Boston, but he was asked to speak, and he's an incredibly eloquent speaker at this meeting, and the person who invited him was in fact invited to leave the organization, and there were many people who were very angry that Dr. Adelin was invited to speak. So it's very controversial within that organization, and yet you can't. And Dr. Tiller repeatedly made the point that it's not moral to do genetic testing and understand the health of the fetus without offering women the choice. And of course, he was a vigorous a person who helped women who had to make this terrible choice. And I see these patients also. In fact, last week and this week I've been seeing patients who had been scheduled to see Dr. Tiller and who were horrified to find that the doctor they were going to see had been shot, killed, assassinated. So these women are desperate, and they have to